We are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the steamy heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city with, well, particularly after this week, a few 100,000 stories. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. The mothership at coalitionradio.us. And now we'll put the links up on all of those sites, now on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and Spotify. Horrify your children by putting in-depth economic analysis discussions right in the heart of their playlist in between, well, whatever the hell kids listen to these days. But tonight we have a repeat offender joining us again for the first time in a little while. It's been too long. He recently received a significant award for his reporting skills here based in New England. Again, it is appointment reading. The Worcester Business Journal does a wonderful job of focusing, analyzing, reporting, talking about, well, a very important part of New England. Of course, we're talking about central New England with its base in Worcester. Of course, he is our good friend Grant Welker. We've had him on a few times to talk about Worcester. The timing seemed particularly apt given the events of this week. Grant, first of all, welcome back to the Coalition. And congratulations. Tell us folks about the award you just won.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me back on. It has been a while. So it's a New England-wide journalism award. It's essentially like a career achievement award, which feels kind of weird. That seems like something you should do when you're closer to retirement. But anyway, it's over the course of my career, and they give out a few of these to daily publications, non-daily, to some college newspapers and the like. So I was recognized for reporting I've done here at the Worcester Business Journal, when I was at the Lowell Sun, and when I was at the Herald News in Fall River before that.
Excellent. Well, it's well earned. Again, folks hear these words all the time here. We're blessed to have folks like you willing to take up part of their Friday night, come and join us live, and then allow us to broadcast over time repeatedly their contributions. We focus on folks who can articulate difficult, challenging, sometimes very misunderstood situations, economics, politics, in a way that does not pander to people, yet at the same time manages to make some fairly arcane issues very accessible. Your paper does an outstanding job of analyzing the development market, the R&D market, really what's going on, really captures the pulse of the business world within the greater Worcester Metro West into central Massachusetts environment. So my hat's off to you folks. In a time when journalism is clearly challenged everywhere, you folks really represent the best of what community journalism can do. Clearly, and somehow I've got to get moved, and maybe when they finally have their opening pitch, I'll be able to move past this cathartic series of events with the Pawtucket Red Sox / Woo Sox. We had the big groundbreaking this past week. You had the dirt. Next time they have one of these, I'm going to sneak in the back and just film them dumping off the dirt, handing out over the shovels to people who clearly shovels are not part of their daily life.
The shovels were baseball bats. The handle of the shovels were actually doubled as baseball bats.
Excellent. So how are things going in Worcester? Give us a snapshot. There's a lot of angst and myth and urban legends surrounding what's happening up there right now down here in Providence. Where do things really stand in the development and the construction of Polar Park?
Sure. Well, I would say as far as the groundbreaking, let's emphasize that it was a ceremonial groundbreaking. Nothing has really taken place at that site yet. The city does have control over much or all of the land that it needs, although of the 5 or so commercial buildings that are on the site, they all still stand. Many of those businesses are still in operation. They're still open. A few have closed. A few have moved. But things are still in development. Even the design of the ballpark is not yet complete. That should be done as soon as next month. But we don't know yet when things would move past that point in terms of public input sessions to give the community a chance to get some feedback to those designs, or just simply to go through the permitting stage through planning board, zoning board of appeals, what have you. So we don't know yet when the real shovels are going to hit the ground, when you're going to actually have excavators there and that type of thing. Nothing has quite yet happened on that site.
Is there any actual objection to what's happening here in Worcester, or are folks just, at this point in time, completely on board?
It seems overwhelmingly positive. Yeah, there's been nothing of the sort that I've seen as far as like a public poll to see what voters think. We can go off of last fall when the city council here had a few public input sessions, and it was pretty overwhelmingly positive. And people are excited. I think people in Worcester really feel like having the team come is a kind of a confirmation of strides that the city has made and that the region has made. So it's something that you and I have talked, and I've been on in the past about some of the economic, the kind of nuts and bolts of it, whether a deal like this makes sense. Does it make sense for a municipality in Worcester sense to spend $100 million plus on a ballpark? And a lot of economists would say it certainly does not. The intangibles, the reason why you want to bring a team to a city, people here are very excited to see Worcester on the front of a jersey in that Red Sox font, that unmistakable Red Sox font. And it just kind of feels, I think in a lot of people's minds, that it's sort of, I'll use the cliche of like the cherry on the top of the sundae that this team will be coming in less than 2 years.
Is public input mandated as part of the development process here? Is there, and by the way, I haven't yet been able to get over to the irony that possibly the Globe's most significant economist slash critic of sports stadiums is in fact Victor Matheson, who is based right down the street at the College of the Holy Cross. College of the Holy Cross. We plan on reaching out to him for comment to monitor this as it goes along. But is there any sort of design input required, or are they just doing this to be gracious and just create a spirit of inclusion?
There hasn't been any public sign off that was needed. There wasn't even like a more informal referendum that would gauge voters' feelings on the matter. And once it came down to the city council or the city administration in the first place reaching agreement with the team, and then the city council then signing off shortly thereafter, there wasn't any public sign off that was needed. And the same goes for that matter for public funding from the state. It's about $35 million in infrastructure for a new parking garage, as well as some housing subsidies, and to remake the kind of infamous Kelly Square. It's infamous in our area.
Yeah.
To the tune of $18 million. I can't remember the exact figure off the top of my head. It's a lot of public money. It didn't require any public votes. Public meaning residents, voters, in Worcester nor on Beacon Hill. That's something I think we alluded to a little bit the last time we were talking. Is in Rhode Island's case, you had to have a lot of powerful people on board, and it never could quite get through where it needed to in the legislature and in the state house. In Massachusetts' case, I was always thinking it would have been a huge hurdle for Beacon Hill, for the state house to sign off on this, for legislators to. And it turns out they never quite needed to.
Interesting. So the actual investment arm of the state that's been involved in this, I mean, who are they? Who's you've got a bond issue at stake here, I believe. Who's underwriting it, and who are the people behind the curtain on the actual financing?
Sure. So the $35 million came from the governor's discretionary spending. Mm-hmm. The remake of Kelly Square will come from the Department of Transportation, and for Worcester, it's through borrowing, and it's in the city's budget.
Interesting. So, to a large degree, on a statewide level, the amounts of money involved were essentially de minimis. I mean, $30 million, $16 million in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts probably does not meet or exceed any real political obstacle. In the absence of any real opposition to it, there really didn't have to be any checks and balances politically.
No, I was surprised to just as an observer to not see more sort of public input scrutiny. That was kind of became a bit of our role of sort of offering a bit of scrutiny to the deal because it didn't take place so much again at the local level or at Beacon Hill. I'm kind of laughing a little because last August when the deal was announced with the team, there was a big press conference in City Hall here in Worcester. There wasn't yet any public votes from the city council, and yet it was portrayed as virtually a done deal at that stage. So it did have the feeling of kind of all taking place a bit more behind closed doors, to say the least.
Right. Do you get the sense, was there anybody in the city council who really provided any real activist opposition?
There's a city councilor, Connie Lukes, who did have some concerns that she did air, but it wasn't the type that ever had any chance of derailing this project. She was mostly the only voice who was voicing any skepticism that this deal would not be a wise one for the city.
Right. There always is that one person, that lone individual.
I've always said it's good for any city council or board of selectmen that I've covered. It's always great to have someone who's a contrarian and someone who will ask the questions that maybe no one else wants to ask, maybe unpopular questions, but things that need to be out there nonetheless.
So you've got this this civic spirit run rampant. Folks are, in the greater public, folks are behind this. They see this, as you said, as an affirmation, as a kind of a stamp of approval on the prospects of the city of Worcester. And I guess no one wants the city of Worcester to fail. No one is. I'm not aware of anybody anyway. Even someone like myself who was an opponent to the project. This is one of these moments where, okay, we all signed on. Let's give the fingers crossed, the pinky swears, and let's hope for the best. What will be interesting to see is if obstacles occur, then what happens. Now, is the design's not done? So it has a general contractor been selected? Is that all in place? I mean,
right. They have a contractor. They have an architecture firm in place, and they say that they're kind of getting to the final stages of getting the plan ready to go through the permitting process. Back a few months ago, we did a story reporting on how they were already starting to fall behind schedule. They had something in the contract with the team that said that by the spring, the city would have all the parcels that it needed for the stadium, and it didn't quite have that yet. The city later said they wanted to have some of the buildings knocked down on the site by June. That hasn't yet happened either. And there does seem to be a lot of feeling, at least from some in the community that we've heard from, talked to, wondering whether this could be built for the spring of 2021. If construction takes place this fall, you'll have roughly a year and a half. I did a story a few months ago looking at some key cases in the minor leagues where ballparks have been built far quicker than that, and in some cases where it has taken much longer than that to build a stadium.
Right.
So a year and a half is enough time. In Worcester's case, this is a complex site. As we've talked about, you have a handful of buildings that still need to be knocked down. You have a grade of, I believe, like 15 feet or so, sloping roughly up from where home plate would be towards center field that has to be addressed. You have potential lingering contamination issues that, to my knowledge, haven't been fully solved or fully addressed, at least publicly. And there's always the matter of Worcester winters,
Yeah.
right? A lot of this work that would have to, of course, be taking place outdoors. In some of the cases we looked at, the ballparks that were built on the shortest timeline were in warmer weather cities where that wouldn't be such an issue. If the ballpark does not open by the start of the 2021 season, I think it will. I think those in charge of this project will make it happen. Any cost overruns are borne by the team, not by the city. My impression would be that the team would want to do it takes to make sure that the ballpark opens on time. The more critical part is not the timeline in my mind for the ballpark in terms of whether this will pay off for the city, but the timeline for the related development that would be built across the street. That project needs to be built soon in order for the city to start reaping the tax revenue that it says will pay for the ballpark and then some. In the city's agreement with the team, they stipulate that part of that development, including a large parking garage, would open for the start of by the beginning of 2021, by the calendar year, and that first phase of that development would open by the time the ballpark opens. And we know a lot less about that related development than we do the ballpark in terms of when construction may begin or exactly what that project would look like. So in terms of whether this is something, and again, kind of in the public eye of a lot of the talk has been, this is more than just a ballpark. It is everything that it will help create and help make happen around it. At this stage, that seems to be something that is already falling quite a bit behind schedule.
And that was the devil in the detail, as it were, that in Rhode Island we were so conscious of, because the term ancillary development became sort of a buzzword here in the greater Providence Pawtucket market. And we pointed out at one point in the Pawtucket development, the Paw Sox agreed to guarantee the creation of a 100,000 square foot retail facility. Now, to the uninitiated, that sounds, wow, 100,000 feet. Well, anyone who's been to a big box store, that means one Barnes & Noble, maybe one Home Depot, who knows, right?
Right.
That in of itself is not going to generate the property tax revenue necessary to ensure debt service. When do you have an idea and a sense of when the debt service on all this debt, if you will, for lack of a better term, when that kicks in? I mean, what?
It isn't just a few years. Yeah. So you would start to have that shortfall. The city has said that even the first phase of that mixed-use development should start reaping enough new tax revenue to already begin making up for all of the debt obligation. And then in subsequent years, when the full project is built out, it would go beyond that and more than pay off those costs.
They always say they're gonna make money on it.
You're right, and we, you mentioned Victor Matheson. There are a lot of other sports economists, more than a dozen that I've talked to, that virtually unanimously will say that doesn't typically happen. In Worcester's case, they're creating a special tax district around the ballpark.
Right.
So new tax revenue from the large mixed-use development and some other sites, that revenue will go exclusively to paying off this debt, whereas normally any new development would go to paying off all city costs. Something economists will say is kind of a sleight of hand, that you're taking new tax revenue and you're actually taking that away from the rest of the city coffers. You're using it just to pay off the debt for one particular project. But in this case, they've never made the argument that the ballpark itself alone would pay for itself. Right. It would take that ancillary development. In this case, it's a part of Worcester that has seen some new growth, but not a lot of new construction. There's not a lot of people live there. There's not a lot of large employers there. It's actually quite a very poor part of the city. I think raises some questions of what you might get for people who would want to live there, at the type of rent that a new construction would demand.
Well, and my concern too is, in this part of southern New England, as opposed to central New England, so much new construction, new commercial, new mixed-use construction screams out for TSAs, tax stabilization agreements. So you have the specter, at least until recently, when finally political forces rose up against it, of developers looking to renew TSAs, when in fact a TSA is supposed to be a way to grease the initial financing, the mechanism which creates the investment. It's certainly not supposed to be an environment where it maintains the profitability of the investment. So the question, and I guess what you're saying is the jury, as it were, is still out, is are you able to attract new ancillary development at what will effectively be a full boat development cost in Worcester? And that's the great unknown, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. There are a lot of subsidies to this project. Of course, you have the directly or indirectly, you have the ballpark costs that are said to help attract this development. There's a hotel there that will be getting a tax break, as well as subsidies for the residential component. The developer also has, the city has waived the first $2 million in permitting costs for that project. So they're really doing a lot to prime the pump to get this development going. So it's, in my mind, as a journalist covering this, very critical to see how that project comes to fruition, because there's so much of this hinging on that, not just as the ballpark itself or whether the team is popular with fans, but is this worth it as a public investment?
Right, and I don't doubt that for the first couple of years, and in my experience has been, and I love cities, and I focus, and again, I'm no expert. I just simply try to play one on the radio, right? I've always been a big fan. I love sitting, popcorn in hand, watching the organic growth and the ebbs and flows of how cities, well, grow organically or not. The impact of say, an artificial injection of activity into a city, and whether or not I compare it to like an organ transplant. Does the transplant take? I don't doubt for a moment that the team will be wildly popular for the first couple of years. Its newness almost ensures that. Its affiliation with the Red Sox guarantees the rest of it. But again,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, and for the team, no, it's okay. I went to Paw Sox games growing up, and they used to draw very well, and in recent years they really have not. And this year I take a look at attendance as much as I can, and it's been very low. Of course they're gonna need a huge influx of new fans. Two big factors there that I'm watching is Worcester is quite a smaller media market. Metro area than is Providence. The Providence metro market includes Fall River and New Bedford, as well as Providence's suburbs are much larger than Worcester's are. So you're moving to a much smaller market. The collegiate league team that's already in Worcester, the Bravehearts,
Right,
intend to stay. They play at Holy Cross. And they draw very well for a collegiate league team. They're one of the tops in the country. So those are two factors to watch. Is if you have enough people who want to continue watching Bravehearts, they tend to have a lot of college students that are from this area who are playing college ball. Also, more affordable entertainment for families who, for a lot of people, they aren't necessarily going to see the top new Red Sox prospect or someone who's coming down on a rehab assignment. They maybe just want to go for affordable night out.
Well,
and if there's enough people that bleed off, that could be a big difference.
Well, and that was always one of the central questions we posed here in Providence. Understanding your audience. How many people go to a Paw Sox game simply because it was very affordable? It was a beautiful summer night, and simply wanted to be outside with their family, and the baseball being played, while important, was almost, I don't want to say a sideshow, but clearly just the mechanism that got them to this outdoor park where they can enjoy their family, versus folks who are, Sox fans looking for, the type of people who are playing fantasy baseball, the hot stove league, and, looking at this AAA player as someone, and waiting for that day, inevitably, as it happens in every Red Sox season, when someone comes down, the new generation equivalent of Big Papi, who comes down for rehab for a couple of games, and they get to see a star and take a couple of pictures and maybe get that autograph. Right. My next question, ironically, was going to be about the Bravehearts. I mean, to your point, the Futures Collegiate Baseball League, I believe as they're called, is actually one of the best run organizations in independent collegiate baseball, because they're able to go into real stadiums, provide a wide range of affiliate entertainment, whether it be adult beverages, food. It's an exceedingly well executed concept. So if in fact My next question would be: have each side, if you will, because they are sides, posted ticket prices yet? If you can see someone who you might play for UMass, and be a D1 solid prospect, and it's $10 less a ticket, how does it go? How does it play?
Sure, yeah. I don't know about ticket prices yet. And another factor to consider too, of course, is no matter what, whether you're talking baseball or another sport, or you're talking minors or majors, ticket prices go up with a new ballpark. And I'm sure that'll be a factor here too. But to know while we're talking about rehab assignments, I was sure to watch when Dustin Pedroia was rehabbing in Pawtucket a few months ago to see what attendance was like. And
great point.
The Pawsock, they did not sell out that weekend. It was a very nice weekend weather-wise, and Dustin Pedroia was there rehabbing, and he didn't sell out those games either. Which whether you think that a lot of fans are maybe reacting to the team leaving, and that has manifested itself that way. I'm not sure what it may be, but certainly the team's attendance in Pawtucket in recent years has been down very significantly.
Right, and again, we just had on our prior segment an economist. When Byron comes on, Byron Shlomo, he's from the 1889 Institute, an Oklahoma-based think tank. We often talk and posture economics as really an expression of the results of and factors that determine behavior, because that's what really economics is. It's not, people focus on the numerical issues. It's really a function of understanding how people react to exogenous events that exhibit themselves in the form of economic stimuli. And this is going to be a hell of a case study. And I don't think anyone, including myself, really knows what the results are going to be. It's a complete toss-up, which if you're on the hook for $70 million of debt is probably not a great feeling. And I just have to wonder in the back alleys, if you will, of the Worcester City Hall, if anybody's got any qualms yet. But that's maybe me projecting as someone who's an opponent of these type of issues. I come at this as an advocate, not as someone like yourself who's a professional, trained journalist.
Right.
So, and by the way, hats off to you for thinking. I hadn't thought of that, the Pedroia angle. That's a fascinating study, because years ago, if you had a Red Sox starter of any import, you would have lines outside of McCoy. You would absolutely have lines. And I can remember when a certain member of the Bash Brothers, who became a Red Sox temporarily, spent some quality time in Pawtucket.
And Sago can't draw fans. Who can?
Yeah.
You're right. And those fans, and I've seen games, the Lowell Spinners, a Class A, lower level team, but they very much promote Mookie Betts and others in recent years that have gone through Lowell. So I think that's a big part of that pride of knowing that those players have gone through there, and you got to see them maybe when they were just an unknown prospect. Right. But for some of these key games, such as Pedroia down rehabbing, and for all we know, he may be done playing entirely at this point. It does seem a little bit eye-opening that the team is so much less popular with fans than it used to be. I remember going to games, it was 20 years ago now, when they last rehabbed McCoy, and to me, they added the outfield berm and a tower where you could stand and watch in left field. And it seemed great to me, but the way ballparks, even in the minor leagues and even at the lowest levels of the minor leagues, they're so much more elaborate than they used to be. In features they have, they're almost just like miniaturized major league ballparks. And that was a story that we wrote recently as well, is the type of amenities that ballparks have these days. In Worcester's case, we did the math. This would be as it's drawn up now, the fourth most expensive minor league ballpark ever built in Worcester, because they design them now not to really be just kind of the metal bleachers that you might have expected a generation or two ago, but parks that they really want to look like the real deal. Like you're watching a major league game, but just in kind of a miniaturized form.
Well, and let me throw 2 points at you. I love your reaction to this. And by the way, if you're just joining us, Grant Welker has joined us. He is with the Worcester Business Journal. And he's been on top of the business environment there for a generation now, even despite the fact that he's a pretty young guy. You've got an existing asset, and this is, I always drew the analogy, it's not unlike, say, a Kmart. Okay, what does a baseball stadium have to do with a Kmart? Well, the owners ultimately have a predictable level of traffic. The way to profit from it is to monetize additional aspects of the store. So if you are measuring retail, if you're running a Kmart and people are spending $22 per average every time they show up at the store, well, how do you raise that to 30? Because ultimately that represents little or no increase in fixed costs, but its impact on the bottom line is profound. It's almost all profit. So that same type of approach, as the market value of professional sports franchise has exploded, and whereas you look at someone like Robert Kraft, and one of the great bargains of all time, bought your New England Patriots for what now would be laughable, a pittance. You've got the point of entree for folks who aren't quite Robert Kraft and aren't quite billionaires. The point of entree is established minor league professional sports. On top of that, you've got companies like, for example, the company that manages the Pittsfield equivalent in the FCBL, who are professional sports management companies who have a management staff in a central location, and much like a bakery franchise is, you leverage that central staff and that central commissary, that central means of production, and you leverage that over 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 sports affiliates. So you've got this incredible complexity now, and this mosaic, if you will, in the business marketplace surrounding professional sports. It's like you said, it's not what you and I grew up with at all. The question, of course, remains is, to me, that was central to the Pawtucket Red Sox experiment, was if in fact the owners of Polar Park are seeking to do whatever they can to monetize the ballpark. And what I mean by that, obviously, is restaurant experience, brew pubs, whatever they do. Do they do that, in a sense, does that prevent the attractiveness, if you will, of the entertainment component of that neighborhood from coming in? Because quite frankly, as someone who on a daily basis works down the street from Gillette Stadium, anytime there's an event going on there, we shut down. We can't literally get there from here. And so, how, if you boil it all down, how do you get both? How do you get that ancillary development, plus at the same time monetize a short season team enough so that you can support the debt service to the community? And that, to me, was the central question.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll just one quick point on what we're talking about is you contrast Ben Mondor, the long since late famous Paw Sox owner, who was able to buy the team, I think, some 40 years ago, and the ownership team now that is a very deep-pocketed group. You have Larry Lucchino, of course, is most well known. You have the founder of TJX. You have former top executives from CVS and other large corporations. So it's a very, very deep-pocketed group with a lot of connections to Rhode Island, for that matter. In terms of Polar Park and monetizing what they'll do there, one economist I was talking to said that although attendance is down across the minor leagues in recent years, that doesn't mean revenue is down.
Right.
Because to go back to the metal bleachers and maybe a cheap hot dog stand and the cheap beer that you would have had a decade or 2 or 3 ago, now they want you, they get more money from you. You may pay not just to have bleacher seats or traditional seating, but maybe you go to they have more picnic benches, or there's one ballpark that has just rocking chairs, if I remember right, for a story we did. Really creative stuff. They have some of these have full sit-down bars.
Right.
They do a lot more. Again, it's not just a quick hot dog. More kind of traditional, almost like restaurant-like food options. So they get more of your dollar. And in Polar Park's case, it will be a little bit like Fenway Park. If people have gone there and along the main entrance, they block off that street and they have outdoor vendors there. The plan here with Polar Park is along the right field line. They will block off that road and have like push cart vendors there selling items, and in that case, the revenue from those sales will be going to the team as well, despite those sales taking place right outside the ballpark.
Yep. And so ultimately now we're at that point where we're within a year or two, literally, of actually finally seeing whether or not it was true or not. It's
Sure. And I think really just, I did read some of the hand wringing that took place in Rhode Island last week with the groundbreaking, and some blame to go around with some people with the city or with the state. And I'll caution, I'm an outsider. I don't know. I don't know what the inner workings of Rhode Island government. My take on following this from Worcester's perspective.
You don't want to know.
It's simply, yeah. In Worcester's case, they had the unanimous feeling that they wanted to spend the money. In fact, about 2 years ago, when the Worcester City Council voted to have the city manager seek a deal, I forget the exact language, but it was something along the lines of for the manager to do everything in his power to get the team. Right. Giving the impression that they wanted this team almost no matter what it takes, practically speaking. It was so important for the city leaders in Worcester to get the team. Worcester has much more of an ability to pay that type of money. Pawtucket never could have borrowed $100 million to keep the team. Yeah. And for the state, at the state level, what Massachusetts is spending over $50 million of its own money for this, and that was something that, again, as an outsider, I don't think a lot of people expected that Rhode Island was going to go above and beyond, not just funding the ballpark, but related infrastructure work as well. I think it's just simply in Worcester specifically, and in City Hall, and in Beacon Hill more broadly, there was just an appetite that they wanted to get this done. It struck me as a type of case where it's almost like in a relationship where Worcester appreciated and valued the Paw Sox more than Pawtucket and Rhode Island did. And maybe that's from having the team for so long that they took it a bit for granted. And Worcester has simply valued it much, much more to do everything it could to line up some corporate support and to make it very clear that they wanted the team very badly.
There's a couple of issues at work here. First of all, if as strongly as I am opposed as a libertarian to private-public partnerships, if 38 Studios doesn't happen, the Paw Sox are building a new stadium in Pawtucket right now, or probably it would have been in Providence.
A lot of people feel that way, certainly.
Right. On the media side, what's interesting is you've got kind of some inside media baseball, if you will. I mean, ironic. The Boston Globe, sensing blood in the water, managed to hire 3 big players from the Rhode Island media market.
Right.
Amanda Milkovich from the Providence Journal, who's a very strong writer. A guy named Dan McGowan, who worked at Go Local, and then was at WPRI Channel 12, considered the preeminent Providence City beat writer of anywhere. And then you've got Ed Fitzpatrick coming back to journalism after having a stint at Roger Williams University as their communications person. They were hired by the Boston Globe to create a Rhode Island edition.
Right.
And the journal is just in free fall at this point. It's tragicomic depending on how you feel. Well, I mean, the word on the street has always been that which favors the advertising coffers of the Providence Journal is where the editorial board is going to go. That separation doesn't exist. Now, of course, I'm playing on urban legends and speculation here, but quite frankly, the Pawtucket Red Sox and/or our new stadium would have been a powerful advertiser, as are the casinos in the Providence Journal.
Right.
A lot of money at stake, and that's why they continue. There's a House writer, a guy named Mark Patinkin, who is an opinion writer, very strong chops in terms of writing, quite a history. He's become, by some estimate, I'm saying it, not you, sort of the house organ, if you will, of the Providence Journal. He's the house guy, and he goes out and constantly writes these articles, with this sort of gauzy-eyed, teary look at what could have been, when quite frankly, overwhelmingly, the people in Rhode Island wanted to keep the Paw Sox, but didn't want a single bit, based on years of deceit, lies, just madness, didn't want a single bit of public money to go into it. And to your point earlier about looking at the strength of the ownership team, the conviction still exists, and it was, by people like me, there's a number of people like me who are activists, that quite frankly, they had the money to simply build the stadium themselves. Terry Murray was one of the people you mentioned. He's the gentleman who orchestrated the acquisition of Fleet Bank by Bank of America.
That's right.
You have, a world-class financier. Phil Ryan, former CEO of CVS, arguably the person who set the stage for CVS becoming one of the largest healthcare players on the planet. So you have folks with sophistication, the connections, the background, the chops, if you will, to have done this privately without a couple of phone calls. Because again, the amount relative to the type of international investment banking standards that exist today is de minimis. It's for lack of a better term, minor league ball. But for a state like Rhode Island that had to, again, absorb the psychic as well as the financial costs of a guy named Schilling, number 38 with the bloody sock, it was just too much to overcome. And there were people like Mattiello, our speaker, who I think deep down realized that. So it was time for them to either put up the money themselves, which they could have easily done, and no one really wanted the Paw Sox to leave, But at the same time, to your point in terms of attendance, it wasn't the numbers weren't going to work at the current stadium given the price that these people paid for the team and their desires to turn it into an investment vehicle as opposed to just kind of towny pride. And I think that's what it really came down to. So we've gone way over time. I know you have a wee little one in the house
that's right.
Who is incredibly well behaved because we haven't heard a peep.
He's downstairs.
He may be listening right now, trying to figure out maybe a future reporter. But Grant, again, I can't thank you enough for your willingness to come out here and join us in this little outpost of indie media. Still love to have you come down. And the next time we get together, I'll make a solemn promise. I won't mention the word Paw Sox, unless, of course, you want to get together.
That's what we talk about.
Dynamic cities, education systems, and meltdowns.
That's true. Actually, there's plenty. I could talk regional business for a while. So
right, and you know what? Quite frankly, Rhode Island can learn a lot from a regional player like Worcester and attracting business without, quite frankly, having to feel like they have to give away the ranch. There's always lots to talk about. So again, where can folks read your?
So sure, please check us out. Yeah, wbjournal.com is a great way. You can reach me. Follow me on Twitter, Grant S. Welker. You'll find a lot of my stories right there. We have plenty of coverage of this deal, of course, that has been ongoing in the last year or so, the last few months, and we're still digging into other things that we'll be writing about in the months and even years ahead. So, please do check it out. We know how big of a deal this is economically and otherwise for Worcester and for the Worcester area, so we're putting as much as we can into covering it.
No, and again, accessibility, information. This is why you need to go to originally written publications with local expertise, boots on the ground, and you're just, quite frankly, my words, not yours, you're simply not going to get that from a remotely printed chain newspaper. It's just not part of their business plan anymore. So Grant Welker, thank you very, very much, and let's get together again soon.
Will do. Thanks a lot for having me.
God bless you, lad, and congratulations on the award, your kiddo, and everything else that's going on in your life.
Thanks a lot.
All right. We're gonna take a quick break right now. Of course, Grant Welker providing us with that sort of boots on the ground analysis that at a level, quite frankly, that I think is that can be emulated here in the great state of Rhode Island. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us. In the coming days, we'll have all sorts of links about how you can listen to this recording on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and we continue to look for avenues and methods to expand our reach. We appreciate folks who continue to take the time to like us and follow us on social media. Social media is and always will be the mother's milk of indie media. We don't have the budgets, the big time exposure that some of these large radio stations, newspapers, TV stations have. So quite frankly, it's how we get the word out so that we can do, I believe, great original programming like tonight. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to try and get Daryl Gould on the line. A couple of other issues have come up in sort of our weekly, almost, coverage of Bristol Warren School District. And of course, after the 8 o'clock hour, Kim Ruff, candidate for the presidency of the United States. She's a member of America's third largest political party, the Libertarian Party. An editorial note. In last week's show, we had a guest appear who, and we haven't had a chance to go to the tapes yet, may have created the impression that CVS Corporation was only doing, well, depending on if you listen to the tape, $1 to $2 million or so to tax abatement. I want to thank Mr. Ward from the Woonsocket City Council, who provided us with original documentation showing that, in fact, the contribution for the pilot, the payment in lieu of payment in lieu of taxation for the CVS Corporation is actually closer to $3 million. It's important in all cases that facts be revered. And should you catch us up on something inadvertent, perhaps intentional, please let us know. You can always email me at pford@coalitionradio.us, pford@coalitionradio.us. And should you be running for office, we've got a number of special elections this year that we've tried to cover, and are looking for a place to kind of practice your media chops, have a conversation about what you're trying to do. We worship at the altar of independent candidates here at the Coalition. Again, you can reach out to pford, @coalitionradio.us. Folks, we're going to take a quick break, and who knows what's coming next. Stay tuned.